The bucket slipped from Lila Turner's hands the moment the wooden planks beneath her feet gave way, and she plunged into darkness with a scream that echoed off the stone walls of the well. Cold water swallowed her up to the waist, shocking her system as she gasped and flailed, her hands scraping against the rough stones as she tried to find purchase. The circle of bright Texas sky above seemed impossibly far away, and panic clawed at her throat as she realized just how deep she had fallen. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she called out for help, her voice hoarse and desperate in the enclosed space. It was August of 1878, and the heat had been relentless for weeks in Madisonville, Texas. The Turner homestead sat 3 miles outside of town, a modest ranch that Lila and her father had worked together since her mother passed 5 years ago. At 22 years old, Lila had grown accustomed to doing most of the heavy work herself since her father's health had declined. Drawing water from the well was a daily chore she had performed hundreds of times, but the old wooden platform had finally rotted through after years of exposure to the elements. Now she stood in the frigid water below ground, her cotton dress billowing around her, teeth chattering despite the summer heat above. She could feel the cold seeping into her bones as she pressed her back against the stone wall, trying to conserve her strength. Her calls for help seemed to disappear into the vast emptiness of the Texas landscape. Her father was in town seeing the doctor, and their nearest neighbor was over a mile away. Fear gripped her as she realized she might be trapped down here for hours, maybe longer. Then she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats approaching, growing louder. Her heart leaped with desperate hope as she screamed again, putting every ounce of strength into her voice. The hoofbeats stopped, and a shadow fell across the circle of light above. "Hello down there. Are you hurt?" The voice was deep and urgent, carrying a strength that immediately made her feel less alone. "I fell through the platform. Please, I cannot climb out on my own," Lila shouted back, her voice breaking with relief and exhaustion. "Hold on. I am coming down." She heard movement above, then saw the rope that usually held the bucket being tested for strength. A moment later, a figure appeared, silhouetted against the bright sky as he began to descend hand over hand down the rope. The well was narrow, and she pressed herself against the wall to give him room. As he came closer, she could make out more details. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty trail clothes and a dark hat pulled low. His boots found the stone edges as he lowered himself with practiced ease, and within moments he was standing in the water beside her. "Grab on, I am getting you out," he said firmly, and she found herself looking up into the most striking pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. His face was strong and weathered, with a few days' worth of stubble along his jaw, and there was something immediately trustworthy about him despite being a complete stranger. "I cannot hold on. I have been down here for so long, my arms have no strength left," Lila admitted, hating how weak she sounded but knowing it was the truth. Her whole body was shaking from cold and shock. The cowboy did not hesitate. "Then I will carry you. Put your arms around my neck and hold on as best you can." She did as he instructed, wrapping her trembling arms around his shoulders. He was solid and warm, and she could feel the strength in him as he secured one arm firmly around her waist. With his free hand, he gripped the rope. "This is going to be rough, but I need you to trust me," he said, his voice close to her ear. "Can you do that?" Lila nodded against his shoulder, not trusting her voice. She felt him test his grip, then they were moving upward. The climb was agonizing. Her rescuer moved in careful, steady increments, his muscles straining with the effort of hauling both their weights up the rope. She tried to help by gripping tighter, making herself as small as possible against him. His breathing was heavy with exertion, but he never faltered, never hesitated. Halfway up, his boots slipped on the wet stone, and they dropped a few inches before he caught them. Lila gasped, but his arm tightened around her reassuringly. "I have got you. I am not letting go," he promised, and something in his voice made her believe him absolutely. They continued upward, inch by painful inch. The circle of sky grew larger, closer. She could feel the strain in his body, hear the controlled breathing as he focused entirely on getting them to safety. Finally, his hand grasped the wooden edge of the well. With a tremendous effort, he hauled them both up and over, and they collapsed on the ground beside the well, both breathing hard. For a moment, they just lay there on the sun-warmed earth. Lila felt the tension drain from her body as relief washed over her in waves. She was out. She was safe. This stranger had risked his own life to save hers without a moment's hesitation. She pushed herself up on shaky arms and looked at him properly for the first time in full daylight. He was younger than she had initially thought, probably only a few years older than herself, maybe 25 or 26. His dark brown hair was damp with sweat, and his gray eyes were studying her with concern. "Are you injured?" he asked, sitting up and examining her for any signs of harm. "No, I do not think so. Just cold and frightened," Lila admitted. "You saved my life. I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed. I am just glad I came along when I did." He got to his feet and extended a hand to help her up. "Ryan Nichols. I am heading through to Houston, but my horse threw a shoe a few miles back. I was hoping to find a ranch where I could ask for help." "Lila Turner," she said, taking his hand. Even after that ordeal, his grip was strong and steady. "This is my father's ranch. We have tools and spare shoes in the barn. I can help you fix that." Ryan looked at her with raised eyebrows. "You just fell down a well. You should get inside, get dry, and rest." "I am fine," Lila insisted, though her dress was dripping and she was still shivering. "Besides, it is the least I can do after what you just did for me." He studied her for a moment, and she saw a small smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "You are stubborn, are not you? I have to be, running this place mostly on my own," she said matter-of-factly. "Come on, the barn is this way." She led him across the dusty yard toward the weathered barn, acutely aware of how she must look with her hair hanging in wet tangles and her dress clinging to her in a most improper way. But Ryan kept his eyes respectfully averted, leading his horse, a beautiful chestnut mare, by the reins. Inside the barn, Lila found some old blankets and draped one around her shoulders before locating her father's farrier tools. Ryan worked with quiet efficiency, examining his horse's hoof and selecting a shoe from the small supply they kept on hand. She watched as he worked, noting the careful way he handled the animal, talking to her in a low, soothing voice. "What takes you to Houston?" Lila asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Work, mostly. I have been working cattle drives up north, but I am hoping to find something more permanent. Maybe start saving to buy my own land someday." He glanced up at her, and she saw something almost vulnerable in his expression. "Getting tired of drifting, I suppose. How long have you been drifting?" 5 years, since I was 21. My parents died of fever, and the bank took our farm in Missouri. Did not seem much point in staying after that." He returned his attention to the horseshoe, his jaw tight. It was clear the memory still pained him. "I am sorry," Lila said softly. "I lost my mother 5 years ago, too. I understand how it changes everything." Ryan looked up at her again, and this time something passed between them, an understanding born of shared loss. "It does. But we keep going, do not we? Because that is what they would have wanted." "Yes," Lila agreed, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "Yes, we do." They fell into conversation as Ryan worked, and Lila found herself talking more freely than she had with anyone in years. She told him about the ranch, about her father's failing health, about the struggles of keeping everything running on her own. He listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights from his own experiences. In turn, he told her about the places he had been, the things he had seen on his travels. He had a way of describing things that made her feel like she was there with him, seeing the vast prairies and towering mountains through his eyes. By the time Ryan finished with the horseshoe, over an hour had passed. Lila had almost forgotten about her wet dress and disheveled appearance. So engrossed was she in their conversation. It was only when she shivered involuntarily that Ryan noticed. "You need to get into dry clothes before you catch your death," he said firmly. "And I should be on my way. I have taken up enough of your time." Disappointment stabbed through Lila, sharp and unexpected. She did not want him to leave. It had been so long since she had talked to someone who really listened, who understood. But she could not think of any good reason to ask him to stay. "Will you at least let me give you some food for your journey? And water for your horse?" she asked, desperate to extend their time together just a little longer. Ryan hesitated, and she could see the internal struggle on his face. "I do not want to impose. It is not an imposition. Please, you saved my life today. Let me do this much at least." He finally nodded, and relief flooded through her. She led him to the house, a simple 2-room structure with a covered porch. While Ryan waited outside, she quickly changed into a dry dress, her fingers fumbling with the buttons in her haste. She caught a glimpse of herself in the small mirror and was horrified by her appearance. Her blonde hair was a tangled mess, her face was smudged with dirt, and her blue eyes looked huge in her pale face. She did her best to make herself presentable, running a brush through her hair and pinning it up properly, washing her face with water from the basin. When she returned outside with a bundle of food and a canteen of fresh water, she found Ryan sitting on the porch steps, gazing out at the landscape. There was something lonely about the picture he made, the strong man who had saved her life but had no place to call home. "Ryan," she said, and he turned to look at her. "My father will be back from town soon. Would you stay for supper? I know he would want to thank you himself for what you did today." She held her breath, waiting for his answer. She knew she was being forward, possibly even improper, but she could not let him ride away without trying. "I would like that," Ryan said slowly, and the smile he gave her made her heart skip a beat. "I would like that very much." Over the next few hours, Lila prepared supper while Ryan helped with some of the heavier chores around the ranch. She watched from the window as he repaired a broken fence rail without being asked, as he checked on the cattle in the near pasture, as he moved with the easy confidence of a man who knew ranch work inside and out. Her father, Thomas Turner, returned just as the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. He was a thin man now, worn down by illness and hard work, but his blue eyes were still sharp. Lila met him at the wagon and quickly explained what had happened. Thomas's face went pale, and he immediately pulled her into a tight embrace. "Thank God you are all right. Thank God this young man came along when he did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. When he released her, she saw tears in his eyes. "Where is he? I must thank him." Ryan emerged from the barn at that moment, and Thomas walked over to him with purpose. "Ryan Nichols, my daughter tells me I owe you her life. There are no words sufficient to thank you for what you did today." "Any decent man would have done the same, sir," Ryan said, shaking Thomas's offered hand. "Perhaps, but you are the one who was there. You are the one who risked your own life to save hers." Thomas gripped Ryan's shoulder with his free hand. "You will always be welcome in this house. Always. As far as I am concerned, you are family now." Lila saw something flash across Ryan's face at that word. Family. A hunger and longing that made her chest ache. She wondered how long it had been since anyone had said such a thing to him. Supper that evening was one of the most pleasant meals Lila could remember in a long time. Ryan had the gift of drawing her father out, getting him to tell stories from his younger days that Lila had never heard before. Thomas laughed more than he had in months, his face animated and alive in a way that medicine and rest had never achieved. Lila found herself laughing too, the terror of the afternoon fading into something almost dreamlike. She caught Ryan looking at her several times throughout the meal, and each time their eyes met, she felt that same strange flutter in her chest. There was something happening between them, something she could not quite name but could feel as surely as she felt her own heartbeat. After supper, Thomas excused himself to rest, his energy depleted by the excitement of the day. That left Lila and Ryan alone on the porch, watching the stars come out one by one in the vast Texas sky. "Your father is a good man," Ryan said quietly. "You are lucky to have each other." "I know," Lila said. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "He is not well, though. The doctor says his heart is weak. I do not know how much longer he has." Ryan turned to look at her, his expression compassionate. "That must be hard, knowing that." "It is, and I worry about what will happen after. I cannot run this ranch alone, not truly. There is too much work for one person." She had never admitted this out loud before, had barely admitted it to herself. "I do not know what I will do." They sat in silence for a moment, and then Ryan spoke. "Lila, I know we only just met today, and maybe I have no right to say this, but would you let me stay for a while? Help out around here? Your father is clearly not up to the heavy work, and you should not be doing it all alone." Lila's heart leaped, but she forced herself to think practically. "I cannot pay you much. We barely make enough to keep ourselves fed and the ranch running. I do not need much. Just food and a place to sleep." "The barn would be fine," Ryan said. "And honestly, it would be helping me too. I told you I was tired of drifting. Maybe I need to stop somewhere for a while, figure out what I really want." "Are you certain?" Lila asked, hardly daring to believe he was offering to stay. "I am certain," Ryan said, and when he looked at her, his gray eyes were steady and sure. "If you will have me, I would like to stay." "Yes," Lila said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Yes, we would be glad to have you." That night, after she had made up a proper bed for Ryan in the barn's small tack room and said good night, Lila lay awake in her own bed, staring at the ceiling. Her arms were sore from her ordeal in the well, and she knew she would have bruises tomorrow. But all she could think about was Ryan, the strength of his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart as he carried her to safety, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh during supper. She barely knew him, she reminded herself. He was a stranger who had come into her life by pure chance. But somehow it did not feel that way. Somehow, it felt like she had been waiting for him without even knowing it. The next morning, Lila woke to the sound of activity in the yard. She dressed quickly and went outside to find Ryan already at work, hauling lumber from the small woodpile to the well. "What are you doing?" she asked, walking over to him. "Fixing this platform before someone else falls through," he said, examining the rotted wood with a critical eye. "This should have been replaced years ago." "I know. My father used to handle things like that, but lately he just does not have the strength, and I do not know enough about carpentry," Lila admitted. "Well, lucky for you, I spent 2 years working with a carpenter in Kansas. I can build you a platform that will last another 20 years, Ryan said with a confident smile. Over the next few days, Lila watched that promise come true. Ryan worked with focused determination, measuring and cutting and hammering until a sturdy new platform stood over the well. But that was only the beginning. He moved on to fixing the barn door that had been hanging crooked, then reinforcing the chicken coop that had been losing birds to predators. He worked from dawn until dusk, and Lila found herself working alongside him whenever she could, handing him tools, holding boards steady, learning from his patient explanations. They fell into an easy rhythm together. Lila would wake early to make breakfast for the three of them. Then she and Ryan would tackle the day's work while Thomas rested or handled the lighter tasks like mending tack. At midday, they would break for a simple lunch, often eaten sitting on the porch steps, and Lila would find herself sharing more and more with Ryan. She told him about her dreams of expanding the ranch someday, of breeding better cattle, of building something that would last. He listened to all of it, taking her ideas seriously, offering suggestions from his own experience. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit on the porch and talk until the stars came out. Ryan told her about his childhood in Missouri, about his parents and the farm they had loved. She learned that his father had taught him to ride when he was 5, that his mother had been a schoolteacher who insisted on educating him properly despite their rural life. She learned that he loved books, especially history, and that he had a habit of noticing small details that others missed. She also learned that he had a wonderful laugh, that he was unfailingly kind to animals, that he never complained even when the work was backbreaking, and that he always kept his word. She learned the way his face changed when he looked at her, softening in a way it never did for anyone else. 2 weeks after Ryan arrived, Lila was in the barn feeding the horses when he came in carrying a bucket of fresh water. She was so lost in thought that she did not notice him at first, and when she turned, she nearly collided with him. His hand shot out to steady her, and suddenly they were standing very close together, his hand on her arm, her palm pressed against his chest. "Sorry," she said breathlessly, but she did not step back, and neither did he. "Lila," Ryan said softly, and there was something in his voice that made her pulse quicken. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" she asked, though part of her already knew, could feel it in the air between them. "I came here planning to stay a few days, maybe a week, but now I do not want to leave. Not ever." His gray eyes searched her face. "Is that completely insane? We have only known each other 2 weeks. If it is insane, then I am just as crazy," Lila admitted. "I have never felt this way before, Ryan. I feel like I have known you my whole life, like I was waiting for you to find me. Lila, I do not have anything to offer you. No money, no land, no prospects. I am just a drifter who happened to be in the right place at the right time," Ryan said, but his hand had moved from her arm to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with infinite tenderness. "You have yourself, and that is everything," she said, covering his hand with hers. "You are good and kind and strong. You make my father laugh. You work harder than any man I have ever known. And when I am with you, I feel happy in a way I have not felt in years. I am falling in love with you," Ryan said, the words coming out raw and honest. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you in that well, looking up at me with those blue eyes, trusting me to save you. I am falling in love with you too," Lila confessed, and saying the words out loud felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I have been falling since you said you would get me out, and I believed you." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she did not. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, filled with all the emotion they had been holding back. She kissed him back, her hands sliding up to rest on his shoulders, and for a moment, the whole world narrowed down to just this, just them, just the feeling of rightness that flooded through her. When they finally broke apart, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. "I want to stay here, Lila. I want to help you build this ranch into something amazing. I want to be with you, but I need to know that is what you want too." "It is exactly what I want," Lila said firmly. "Stay, Ryan. Please stay." "I am not going anywhere," he promised and kissed her again. That evening, they told Thomas about their feelings for each other. Lila had been nervous about how her father would react, but Thomas just smiled, a knowing look on his weathered face. "I am not blind, daughter. I have seen the way you two look at each other. I have seen how happy you have been these past 2 weeks. He turned to Ryan. Young man, I would be honored to have you as part of this family, if that is what you are both wanting. I would like that very much, sir, Ryan said seriously. I love your daughter, and I promise to take care of her and this ranch as if they were my own. I believe you will, Thomas said. And call me Thomas. If you are going to be my son, we should not stand on formality. Over the following weeks, Ryan proved his words true 100 times over. He worked tirelessly to improve the ranch, but more than that, he made Lila feel cherished in ways large and small. He would pick wildflowers and leave them in a jar on the kitchen table. He would save the best pieces of meat for her at meals. He would brush down her horse without being asked, check the henhouse at night so she did not have to go out in the dark, and fix her saddle when he noticed the leather was wearing thin. But it was the quiet moments Lila treasured most. The way Ryan would seek her out after a long day just to talk, asking about her day and really listening to the answer. The way he would reach for her hand when they sat on the porch in the evenings, threading his fingers through hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. The way he looked at her like she was something precious and wonderful. They kissed often now, stealing moments together in the barn or behind the house, learning the feel and taste of each other. Ryan was always respectful, always mindful of propriety, but the passion between them grew stronger every day. Lila found herself dreaming of a future with him, of marriage and children and building a life together. One evening in late September, about 6 weeks after Ryan had arrived, Thomas called them both into the house. He looked more serious than usual, and Lila felt a flutter of worry in her stomach. Sit down, both of you, Thomas said, gesturing to the chairs at the table. When they were seated, he continued, I have been thinking about the future, about this ranch and what will happen to it. Father, you do not need to worry about that now, Lila started. But Thomas held up a hand. Let me finish, Lila. My health is not getting better. We all know that. The doctor has told me I probably have a year left, maybe less. He paused, and Lila felt tears prick her eyes, but she forced them back. I want to know that you will be taken care of when I am gone. That this ranch, which has been in our family for 20 years, will continue. It will, Thomas. I give you my word, Ryan said quietly. I know you do, son. I have watched you these past weeks, and I have seen your character. You are a good man, Ryan Nichols, better than most. Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Which is why I want to give you this. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring. Lila recognized it immediately as her grandmother's wedding ring, the one her mother had worn until her death. This belonged to my mother and then to my wife. I want you to give it to Lila, if she will have you, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. I want to see my daughter married before I go. I want to know she has a good man by her side. Lila looked at Ryan, her heart in her throat. She saw the emotion on his face, the love and the honor and the fierce determination to be worthy of this gift. Ryan took the box with trembling hands, then turned to Lila. To her surprise, he slid from his chair and knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. Lila Turner, I know we have only known each other a short time, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you with everything I am. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and you make me want to be a better man. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and building a future with you? Tears were streaming freely down Lila's face now, but she was smiling through them. Yes, of course I will marry you. Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as she cried happy tears against his shoulder. Over Ryan's shoulder, she saw her father wiping his own eyes, a smile of pure joy on his face. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Madisonville. It was a simple ceremony, attended by a few neighbors and the pastor, but to Lila, it was perfect. She wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried a bouquet of fall wildflowers that Ryan had picked that morning. When Ryan saw her walking down the aisle toward him, the look on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife and told Ryan he could kiss his bride, he cupped her face in both hands and kissed her with such tenderness that Lila felt tears spring to her eyes again. Thomas hosted a small reception at the ranch afterward, and though he tired quickly, Lila had never seen him so happy. He pulled her aside at one point and said, "Your mother would have loved him. I wish she could have been here to see this." "I think she was," Lila said, squeezing her father's hand. "I think she sent him to me." That night, in the room that was now theirs, Ryan made love to Lila with reverence and passion. He was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt like the most natural and right thing in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Ryan traced lazy patterns on her skin as they talked and laughed and made plans for their future. "I never thought I would have this," Ryan admitted in the darkness. "A home, a wife, a family. After I lost my parents, I thought I would just drift forever." "You have it now," Lila said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "You have me, and I am never letting you go." "Promise?" he asked, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Promise," she confirmed. The next few months were the happiest of Lila's life. She and Ryan worked the ranch together, true partners in every sense of the word. Ryan's ideas and hard work began to pay off. He negotiated a better price for their cattle, started breeding their horses more selectively, and even convinced Lila to try planting a small crop of cotton on some of their unused land. Thomas watched it all with pride, his energy declining but his spirits high. In December, as the Texas winter set in with its mild chill, Lila began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited until she was sure before telling Ryan, and when she finally did, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then set her down carefully and placed his hand over her still flat stomach with wonder in his eyes. "We are going to have a baby," he said, as if testing the words. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be an amazing father," Lila said, covering his hand with hers. "Our child is so lucky to have you." Thomas was equally delighted by the news. "I am going to be a grandfather," he said, his eyes filling with tears. "I am going to hold my grandchild before I go. Thank you for that gift." As winter turned to spring, Thomas grew steadily weaker. He spent most of his days in bed now, but he was at peace, surrounded by love. Ryan would sit with him for hours, reading aloud from Thomas's favorite books or just talking. Lila would hear them through the door, her husband and her father bonding in that special way, and it filled her heart to overflowing. In April, when the wildflowers were blooming across the Texas landscape, Thomas Turner passed away quietly in his sleep. Lila and Ryan were devastated by the loss, but there was also gratitude. He had lived to see his daughter married to a good man, to know that a grandchild was on the way, to see the ranch thriving under new management. He had died knowing his family would be all right. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Ryan carved a beautiful headstone from local wood. At Lila's request, he added an inscription below Thomas's name, "Beloved father and grandfather, who lived to see his daughter happy." In the weeks after the funeral, Lila and Ryan drew closer together, their shared grief forging an even stronger bond between them. Ryan took over full management of the ranch, and under his capable leadership, it continued to prosper. He hired on a young ranch hand named Samuel to help with the heavy work, knowing that Lila would need more help as her pregnancy advanced. As Lila's belly grew round with their child, Ryan became even more attentive, if that was possible. He would not let her do any heavy work, insisted she rest more, and worried constantly about her health. It would have been annoying if it was not so endearing. "Ryan, I am not made of glass," she told him one day when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Yes, but this is my baby, and you are my wife, and I am going to make sure you are both safe," he said stubbornly, taking the basket from her hands. "Now go sit down and let me do this." Lila laughed and kissed his cheek. "I love you, you overprotective fool." "I love you too," he said, grinning at her. "Now sit." Their son was born on a hot August day, almost exactly 1 year after Lila had fallen in the well. The labor was long and difficult, and Ryan paced outside like a caged animal, nearly wearing a hole in the porch with his worried footsteps. But when the midwife finally emerged and told him he had a healthy son and his wife was fine, his face transformed with joy. He rushed inside to find Lila propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tired eyes and said, "Come meet your son." Ryan approached almost reverently and looked down at the small red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby's eyes were closed, his tiny fists waving in the air, and Ryan felt his heart expand in his chest in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Ryan whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers immediately curled around his much larger finger, gripping with surprising strength. "He is absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Lila asked, and carefully transferred the baby into Ryan's arms. Ryan held his son with the same careful reverence he had shown Lila that first day in the well, as if he was holding something infinitely precious and fragile. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your father. I promise to always protect you and love you. I promise to teach you to be a good man. I promise to never let you down." Tears were streaming down his face, and Lila felt her own eyes filling again. This moment, this perfect moment of her husband meeting their son, was something she knew she would treasure forever. "What should we name him?" Ryan asked, unable to take his eyes off the baby. Lila had been thinking about this. "I would like to name him Thomas, after my father. Thomas Ryan Nichols. What do you think?" Ryan looked at her, his gray eyes bright with emotion. "I think it is perfect. I think your father would have been so proud." Little Thomas Ryan Nichols thrived from the very beginning. He was a healthy, happy baby with a good appetite and his mother's blue eyes. As he grew, it became clear he also had his father's determination and curiosity. Ryan proved to be every bit the wonderful father Lila had known he would be. He would spend hours playing with Thomas, talking to him in that gentle voice, showing him the ranch and all its animals. By the time Thomas was 2 years old, the ranch had grown significantly. Ryan's hard work and business sense had paid off, and they were now one of the more prosperous small ranches in the area. They had hired 2 more hands to help with the work, expanded their herd, and added more land. Ryan had also built an addition onto the house, giving them more space now that their family was growing. Because Lila was pregnant again, this time with a little girl if the midwife's predictions were correct. Ryan was just as protective and worried as he had been the first time, maybe more so now that he understood fully what childbirth entailed. "I just want you and the baby to be safe," he told Lila one evening as they sat on the porch watching Thomas play in the yard. "I could not bear it if something happened to either of you." "We will be fine," Lila assured him, taking his hand. "I am strong, and this baby is strong too. I can feel it." Their daughter, Rose Marilyn Nichols, was born in the spring of 1881, an easier birth than her brothers. She had Ryan's dark hair and a temperament that was already showing signs of being more placid than her energetic brother. Ryan fell in love with her just as instantly and completely as he had with Thomas. Watching Ryan with their children, seeing him play with them and care for them and love them so fiercely, made Lila fall in love with him all over again every single day. He would often tell the children the story of how he and their mother met, how she had fallen in the well and he had climbed down to save her. "And your mother was so brave," he would tell them. "She was scared, but she trusted me. She held on and I got her out. And from that day forward, I knew I would never let her go." "And you never did," Lila would add, smiling at her husband over their children's heads. "And I never will," Ryan would confirm. As the years passed, the Nichols family continued to grow and thrive. They had 2 more children, another boy named Samuel James in 1883 and a second daughter, Eliza May, in 1885. The ranch prospered under Ryan's management, becoming known throughout the county for the quality of their cattle and horses. They built a bigger house, comfortable and welcoming, and planted trees that would someday provide shade for grandchildren. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryan surprised Lila with a gift. He led her out to the old well, which was still fitted with the platform he had built all those years ago, though they had long since dug a new, safer well closer to the house for daily use. "Do you remember this place?" Ryan asked with a smile. "How could I forget?" Lila said, squeezing his hand. "This is where my life truly began." Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden plaque. On it, he had carved the date of her fall and his rescue, along with the words, "She fell, he climbed down, and love lifted them both up." "I want to mount this here," Ryan said, "so we never forget how lucky we are, how one terrible moment turned into the best thing that ever happened to us." Lila threw her arms around his neck, kissing him soundly. "I love you so much. I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you even more tomorrow." "I love you too," Ryan said, holding her close. "You are still the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Saving you from that well was the best thing I ever did. Not because it was heroic, but because it brought me to you." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, before heading back to the house where their children were waiting. That evening, the whole family gathered on the porch as they often did. Thomas, now a lanky boy of 9, was teaching his younger siblings a song he had learned in school. Rose, at 8, was carefully braiding wildflowers into a crown. Samuel, 6 years old, was showing off the wooden horse Ryan had carved for him. And little Eliza, just 4, was curled up in Lila's lap, fighting sleep. Ryan looked at his family, at the ranch spreading out around them, at the life they had built together, and felt a profound sense of gratitude and contentment. He thought back to that day 11 years ago when his horse had thrown a shoe and led him to this place. He thought about hearing Lila's cries for help from the well, about climbing down into the darkness, about that first moment when he had looked into her blue eyes and felt something shift in his chest. He had told her to grab on, that he was getting her out. He had saved her life that day. But the truth was, she had saved his too. She had given him a home, a family, a purpose, and a love deeper than he had ever imagined possible. He had been drifting when he found her, lost and alone, but she had anchored him, given him a reason to stay, and together they had built something beautiful. Lila caught him staring and raised an eyebrow in question. He just smiled and reached for her free hand, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss. She smiled back, that same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago, and he knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the sun set over the Texas landscape, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Nichols family sat together in perfect contentment. They had faced hardships and loss, had worked harder than most people could imagine, but they had also found something rare and precious. They had found love, the kind of love that lasted, that grew stronger with each passing year, that created new life and new hope. And it had all started with a fall into darkness and a stranger's voice saying, "Grab on. I am getting you out." By the time their children were grown, Ryan and Lila had become pillars of the Madisonville community. Their ranch, now called the Nichols Ranch, was one of the largest and most successful in the county. But they never forgot their humble beginnings, and they were known for their generosity and kindness to those in need. Thomas, their eldest, showed a natural aptitude for ranching and took over much of the day-to-day management by the time he was 18, allowing Ryan to focus on expanding their business interests. Rose surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, inspired by stories of her paternal grandmother. Samuel wanted to be a lawman, much to his parents' worry, but they supported his dreams as they always had. And Eliza, the baby, showed signs of being the most business-minded of all of them, already at 12 negotiating better prices at the general store than her father could manage. On a warm evening in 1894, 16 years after that fateful day at the well, Ryan and Lila sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Thomas had married a sweet girl named Margaret, and they had 3 children of their own now. Rose was courting a young banker from Houston, and the wedding was planned for the fall. "Can you believe it?" Lila said, leaning against Ryan's shoulder. "Grandchildren, when did we get so old? Speak for yourself." "I am still young and spry," Ryan said, grinning at her. At 42, he was still strong and handsome, though his dark hair was now threaded with gray. "You are ridiculous," Lila said fondly. At 38, she had a few gray hairs of her own, and fine lines around her eyes from years of smiling. "But I love you anyway." "Just anyway?" Ryan teased, pulling her closer. "Desperately, madly, completely," Lila amended. "Better. Much better," Ryan said, and kissed the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower. One of their grandchildren, Thomas's eldest boy Jacob, came running up to the porch. "Grandpa Ryan, tell us the story again, about how you saved Grandma from the well," the 5-year-old demanded. "Again? I told you that story just yesterday," Ryan protested, but he was already smiling. "Please," Jacob begged, and soon the other grandchildren had gathered around, all clamoring for the story. Ryan looked at Lila, who nodded with a smile. She never tired of hearing him tell it, of seeing the love in his eyes as he recounted that day. All right," Ryan said, settling back in his chair. "It was a hot August day, much like this one, back in 1878. I was riding through on my way to Houston when my horse threw a shoe. I was tired and dusty and not in the best of moods, wondering how I was going to find help in the middle of nowhere. And then I heard the most beautiful sound I had ever heard." "What sound, Grandpa?" Jacob asked, even though he knew the story by heart. "Your grandmother's voice, calling for help. I rode up to the well and looked down, and there she was, the prettiest girl I had ever seen, stuck down in that cold water with the most frightened blue eyes looking up at me. And do you know what I said? 'Grab on, I am getting you out.'" All the children chorused together. "That is right," Ryan said, his eyes finding Lila's. "I told her to grab on, and I got her out. And she was so brave, holding on tight even though she was scared and cold and tired. And the moment I got her to safety, I knew my life had just changed forever. I knew I had found the person I was meant to spend the rest of my life with." "And then you got married and had babies," one of the younger children added. "Eventually, yes," Ryan said, laughing. "But first I had to convince your grandmother to let me stay and help on the ranch. And then I had to convince her to fall in love with me, which took at least 2 whole weeks." "It did not take 2 weeks," Lila protested. I was already half in love with you after 3 days. See? 2 weeks was a generous estimate, Ryan said, winking at the children. Your grandmother fell for my devastating charm almost immediately. I fell for your kindness and your strength and your good heart, Lila corrected, but she was smiling. The charm came later. As the children ran off to play before bedtime, Ryan pulled Lila into his arms. Thank you, he said softly. For what? Lila asked, surprised. For falling into that well. For trusting me to get you out. For letting me stay. For loving me and building this life with me. Ryan cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes serious now. I was so lost before I found you, Lila. I did not even know how lost I was until you showed me what it meant to have a home. You gave me just as much, Lila said, her own eyes growing misty. You gave me love and partnership and a family. You gave me a future I never dreamed possible. You saved my life that day, Ryan, in more ways than one. They kissed as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, and in that moment, they were not grandparents or respected ranchers or pillars of the community. They were just Ryan and Lila, the cowboy and the girl from the well, still as in love as they had been 16 years ago. The years continued to pass in a blessed rhythm. The Nichols ranch thrived across generations. All 4 of their children married and started families of their own, though Thomas and Samuel stayed on the ranch while Rose and Eliza moved to Houston with their husbands. But they visited often, bringing the grandchildren for long summers on the ranch where they could run free and learn the land the way their parents had. Ryan taught his sons and grandsons everything he knew about ranching, about hard work and integrity and treating people fairly. Lila taught her daughters and granddaughters to be strong and independent, to never be afraid of hard work, and to always trust their own judgment. Together, they created a legacy of love and strength that would echo through the generations. In 1903, on their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire Nichols family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. All 4 children were there with their spouses and children, filling the house with noise and laughter. Neighbors came from miles around to celebrate with them, bringing food and music and well wishes. At the height of the celebration, Ryan stood up and asked for quiet. He pulled Lila to her feet beside him and addressed the crowd. 25 years ago, I was a drifter with no home and no family, just riding through Texas hoping to find work. And then I heard a voice calling for help, and my whole life changed in an instant. He turned to look at Lila, his eyes soft with emotion. This woman gave me everything. She gave me love and a home and a family. She gave me purpose and hope and a reason to be better than I was. Every day for 25 years, I have woken up grateful that my horse threw that shoe, grateful that I happened to be riding past at just the right moment. Because that moment brought me to the love of my life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a small charm shaped like a well bucket. I had this made for you, Ryan said, fastening it around Lila's neck. So you will always remember where we started and how far we have come. Lila touched the charm, tears streaming freely down her face. I love it. I love you. After 25 years, I love you more than ever. That is good, Ryan said, grinning through his own tears. Because I plan on loving you for at least another 25. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The children and grandchildren swarmed around them, hugging and laughing and crying happy tears. And as Ryan held Lila close, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built, he sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that August day in 1878, when he had climbed down into a well and found his future waiting for him. As the evening wore on and the party continued, Lila found a quiet moment to slip away to the old well. It stood silent and unused now, a monument to their beginning. The wooden plaque Ryan had made all those years ago was still mounted beside it, weathered but still legible. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Ryan. He had always had an uncanny ability to know when she needed him. "Remembering?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Always," Lila said, leaning into him. "Sometimes it feels like a dream, like I will wake up and find that none of this was real, that you were just a fantasy, and I am still stuck down in that well." "You are not," Ryan said firmly, wrapping his arms around her. "This is real. I am real. And I am never letting you go." "Good," Lila said, "because I am not letting you go either." They stood there as the stars came out overhead, the same stars that had watched over them for 25 years of marriage. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their family, laughter and music and life. Ryan and Lila grew old together in the house they had built, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Ryan's hair went completely silver, and his face became lined with years of hard work and laughter. Lila's blonde hair faded to white, and arthritis made her hands stiff, but her blue eyes remained as bright and sharp as ever. They marked their 50th wedding anniversary in 1928 with another big celebration, though it was more subdued than the 25th had been. Ryan was 76 now, and Lila was 72, and while they were both still mobile and sharp-minded, age had slowed them down considerably. Thomas ran the ranch now with his own sons, and it had grown to be one of the most successful operations in all of East Texas. Rose had become the principal of the school in Madisonville, following in her grandmother's footsteps in her own way. Samuel had served as sheriff for 15 years before retiring, and Eliza owned a successful business in Houston with her husband. The Nichols name was respected throughout the region, synonymous with integrity and hard work. But more than their business success or community standing, Ryan and Lila's greatest legacy was the love they had shared and the example they had set. Their children and grandchildren had all witnessed what a true partnership looked like, what it meant to love someone through good times and bad, through plenty and want, through joy and sorrow. They had learned that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made new every single day. On a peaceful evening in the autumn of 1931, Ryan and Lila sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. Ryan was 79 now, his health failing though his mind remained sharp. Lila, at 75, stayed by his side constantly, just as he had once promised to stay by hers. "Do you have any regrets?" Ryan asked suddenly, his voice soft in the gathering dusk. Lila turned to look at him, surprised. "Regrets? No, none." "Why do you ask?" "I just want to make sure. I want to know that I gave you a good life, that you have been happy," Ryan said, and she could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the need to know that he had fulfilled his promises. "Ryan Nichols, you gave me the most wonderful life I could have ever imagined," Lila said firmly, taking his weathered hand in hers. "You have made me happy every single day for 53 years. You kept every promise you ever made to me. You have been the best husband, the best father, the best man I have ever known. I have zero regrets except that I did not fall in that well sooner, so I could have had even more years with you." Ryan laughed, the sound a little wheezy but genuine. "Only you could say you wished you had fallen down a well sooner." "It is true though," Lila insisted. "That well brought you to me. It was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me." "It was lucky for both of us," Ryan said, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. "I love you, Lila. I have loved you from the moment I saw you in that well, and I will love you beyond my last breath." "I love you too," Lila whispered, tears sliding down her wrinkled cheeks. "Always." Ryan passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, with Lila holding his hand. He was buried on the hill next to Thomas Turner, overlooking the ranch he had built and the land he had loved. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched over the years. Lila grieved deeply for her husband, But she also found comfort in knowing that they had had 53 wonderful years together. They had built a life, raised a family, and loved each other well. Not everyone got that blessing. She lived for another 4 years without him, surrounded by the family they had created, telling and retelling the story of how they met. She would sit on the porch in her rocking chair and talk to the great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather, about his kindness and strength and the way he had saved her from the well all those years ago. And he said, "Grab on, I am getting you out," she would tell them, her voice growing soft with memory. And I grabbed on, and he did. He got me out, and then he stayed by my side for the rest of his life. That is what true love looks like, children. It looks like someone climbing down into the darkness to save you, and then choosing to stay with you every day after. Lila Turner Nichols died peacefully in her sleep in February of 1935, at the age of 79. She was laid to rest between her husband and her father on the hill overlooking the ranch. Her children made sure that her headstone read, "Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She fell, he saved her," and together they built a legacy of love. The old well remained on the property for many years after, carefully preserved by the Nichols family as a memorial to Ryan and Lila's love story. Generations of their descendants would visit it, would read the wooden plaque that Ryan had carved, and would remember the story of how their family began with a fall into darkness and a cowboy's promise to get her out. And in the end, that is what endured. Not the ranch, though it prospered for many years. Not the money or the land or the success, though those things were real and lasting. What truly endured was the love story. The story of a girl who fell in a well and a cowboy who climbed down to save her. The story of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built a life together based on love, trust, and unwavering commitment to each other. It was a story that their children told to their children, who told it to their children after them. It was a story that became part of family legend, embellished and romanticized over the years, but always holding at its core a simple truth: that sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places, in the darkest moments, when you are at your most vulnerable. And when it does, if you are brave enough to grab on and hold tight, it can lift you up and carry you through a lifetime of joy. The Nichols Ranch eventually passed out of family hands in the 1960s, sold to a larger operation. But before they sold it, the family carefully removed the wooden plaque from beside the old well and the headstones from the hill. The plaque now sits in a place of honor in the home of Ryan and Lila's great-great-granddaughter, who was named Lila Rose in honor of her ancestors. The family gathers there every year on the anniversary of that August day in 1878, to remember and to celebrate the love that started it all. Because in the end, Ryan and Lila's story was not just about a rescue from a well. It was about two people who saved each other in all the ways that really matter. He gave her strength when she was weak, stability when her world was uncertain, and love when she had almost given up hope. She gave him a home when he was drifting, a family when he was alone, and a purpose when he had lost his way. Together, they created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, a legacy of love that continued to inspire everyone who heard their story. And it all began with a simple promise, spoken in the darkness of a well on a hot August day: "Grab on, I am getting you out." For simple words that changed two lives forever and echoed through the generations that followed. A reminder that love often begins with one person reaching out to another in their moment of greatest need and choosing to hold on, no matter what comes after.